Welcome back, second graders. Today is Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. Today is our very last math lesson. This makes me sad, but I know some of you will probably have mixed emotions when it comes to this, but this is our very last math lesson, and it's the last day that we're going to talk about 3D shapes. Up here, I have 3 examples of 3D shapes that we haven't talked a great deal about. So we have an example of a sphere, we have an example of a pyramid, and we have an example of a cone. Based off of what we've learned over the past couple of days about faces of shapes and surfaces of shapes and how to tell how a shape is a prism, I want you to describe the properties of these 3 shapes. So in order to do this assignment, you need to make sure you have something to write with and something to write on. And then you're going to need to write and separate your paper so that you have an area to describe the sphere, an area to describe the pyramid, and an area to describe a cone. So if someone asked you what the properties of these 3 shapes were, what would you say to them? You should be thinking about their faces, you should be thinking about their surfaces, if they're flat or if they're curved, so that you're able to describe these 3 3D shapes. So I would like you to pause the video right now and go ahead and describe these 3 shapes. Okay, hopefully you've had some time to take a look through it. So right now we're going to go in and we're going to do some work describing these 3D shapes. Well, one thing with the sphere that I can see is that it is round. So I'm going to write that as a description. It's round. Definitely does not have flat sides or surfaces, but in fact, it has a curved surface. So what I mean by that is I could roll this across the table. And the other thing that I can notice here about the sphere is that there are no faces. It's completely round and has no faces. Awesome. The pyramid is a little bit different. I see that this pyramid has faces. I see that the base of the pyramid, it has one base that is looks like a square, but it could also be a rectangle. Remember, a square is a rectangle, so I'm going to include that in my definition. I also see that it has triangles. So it has 4 triangular faces. Wonderful. And remember, this is important that this square or rectangle is the base of the pyramid. And the next one is a cone. I see in a cone, and it's hard to tell because it's not a picture like this, but I know that a cone has one face. And here's that example of the cone from my shape collection. It has one face. And so that face is a circle. So it has one circular face. And it also has a curved surface. But just like the sphere does, okay? So it has a curved surface that goes around, but the difference is that the curved surface comes to a point. So here we can see that the curved surface goes around and comes together at a point. Awesome. So this is how I would describe these 3 shapes. Now, I have some practice problems that we're going to be going through to learn more about these shapes. Before we do that though, I just want to show you some graphics about the shapes and also include one shape that was not in your problem solving task. So here is some information about the sphere. It's a 3D shape that is perfectly round. A sphere has no faces, and it's a ball. A ball is an example of a sphere, so any type of ball that you might play with. The other shape we talked about is a cone, and that's a 3D shape that has one circular face. It has a curved surface that comes to a point or a vertex, so that's right here as the cone. The other shape that we talked about in our problem solving task was our pyramid. And it says that it has 4 triangular faces, it has a rectangular face on the bottom, and it has 8 edges and 5 vertices. Those are things that you're going to learn next year, but here's that example of the pyramid. And then there was one other 3D shape that we've mentioned a couple of times in the past 2 days, and this 3D shape is called a cylinder. And here is the example that I have of a cylinder. Remember I said this kind of reminds me of a soup can. And so a cylinder has 2 circular faces, so one here and one here on the top and bottom, and it has a curved surface. So that means that we could roll this cylinder on the ground or on the table. And it is the shape of a can or a tube. Fantastic. All right. So let's get into a couple practice problems where we're going to be talking about these different shapes: the cylinder, the sphere, the cone, and the pyramid. So the problem that we are going to be doing together today is the number 1 up top. It is asking us to circle all of the cones and cross out all of the spheres. So we're just focusing on cones and spheres. Now remember, I'm going to see where I put it right here. These 2 shapes are my cones and my spheres. So my spheres are like completely round, they have no faces, and my cone has 1 circular face that comes to a point, and it also has that curved surface. So let's follow these instructions and let's circle all of the cones and cross out all of the spheres. Perfect. Yes. All right. Is this a cone or a sphere? No, it is not. This is more of a cylinder. Over here, this is a picture, I think it's either of like a drum or some sort of cake maybe. It's hard to kind of tell, but this is actually a cylinder as well. It has a top and a bottom, and then it has that curved surface. So I'm not going to do anything with that. This is an 8-ball. There's a game called pool, and this is the 8-ball that is on top of the pool table. This is a sphere. So my job was to cross out the spheres, so I'm going to do that. Over here is a prism. This looks like some sort of cube or a rectangular prism, so I'm not going to do anything about that because I'm looking right now for cones and spheres. Over here, that's an ice cream cone. We're going to focus on this part. I know an ice cream cone, the cone part, is definitely a cone, a 3D cone, so I'm going to circle that. Over here is another example, looks like a soup can. That's another example of a cylinder. I'm going to leave it alone. This paint can as well is another example of a cylinder. I'm going to leave that one alone. This is a basketball. Remember, spheres are balls, or balls are those sphere-like shapes. Right here, this looks, we'll go over here first. This is a tennis ball. Again, any type of ball represents a sphere, so I cross out my spheres. This is a box that's opened, and in fact, it looks like one of those square prisms. Kenzie, sorry, my daughter is playing in the same room, so let me zoom out a little bit because things got a little disjointed. This is actually a square prism, so I'm going to leave it alone. Here's a picture of the world. It's actually the shape of a globe, and a globe is a sphere, so I'm going to cross that out. Mackenzie, please stop. Over here is a party hat, and it looks like a cone. Here you have the point that comes at the top and the circular face, so I'm going to circle that. That is a cone. Over here is another cylinder. This looks like some sort of jar, maybe a jar of peanut butter. I'm going to leave that alone. Over here is a rectangular prism. This is a rectangular base that's being connected by other rectangles, so I'm going to leave that alone. We know that these are an example of dice. These dice represent a cube or a square prism. I'm going to leave those alone. And this is a traffic cone, or you might see these cones being used by Miss Ribeiro in gym class to mark different spots during an obstacle course or a race. And so cones generally look like this. So I would give this as an example of a cone. So I'm going to circle it. Awesome. Whenever you're doing any work with 3D shapes, it's important that you remember the properties of these shapes and what makes that a particular shape. This is the problem you're going to do by yourself. This problem says, Hazel said this shape is a cone. Eric said it's a sphere. And Tony said it isn't a sphere or a cone. Who do you agree with? Explain using words and math vocabulary about 3D shapes. So pause the video right now and answer this question. This shape that you're being shown is actually this shape. So I'll just turn it around a little bit so you can see it. I'll hold it right next to it. Go ahead. Who's right? Hazel, Eric, or Tony? Pause the video and answer. Wonderful. Let's take a look at this problem. Hazel thinks that it's a cone. When I look at this shape, which is this shape here, I know it's not a cone. And I know it's not a cone because a cone comes to a point. It definitely has the circular face that's on the bottom here. But this shape is not coming to a point, so it cannot be a cone. I'm going to cross off Hazel's name in the problem to know that I disagree with her. Eric said that it's a sphere. Well, we already know it has a circular face here, and we know that spheres have no faces. They're actually perfectly round, and they look, and balls are examples of spheres. So it cannot be a sphere, so we disagree with Eric. But let's see about Tony, because we could disagree with him too. Tony said that it isn't a sphere or a cone. But that's exactly what we're talking about. So we agree with Tony. So let's see. We agree, or I agree is fine. Because this shape has one circular face that does not come to a point like a cone. Also, spheres have 0 faces. So we just explained why Tony is right because we use the properties of a cone and a sphere in our explanation. Awesome. So right now your job is going to be to work on your exit ticket for today. Now for your exit ticket today, make sure you're doing your best work because it's your last exit ticket for math for the 2019-2020 school year. Again, guys, it's been so much fun doing these math lessons with you through distance learning. I hope that you've enjoyed them. I hope that they haven't been too challenging, and all of this knowledge that you've been practicing during these math lessons is really, really, really going to help you next year. Let me zoom out here so you can see my face. That's really, really going to help you next year when you are in the next grade. So definitely do your best all the time. Make sure you get your summer life work done. If you have questions, try your best to think about strategies to answer them. Show all of your work on all of your math, and I hope you have a fantastic summer. I hope you're able to get outside and enjoy the beautiful weather and just enjoy being a kid. Well, I will see you all next year.